This video was brought to you by Jeffrey.
This video is not to bash women, but it is to highlight the suffering of men that we usually don't get to speak about.
12 seconds later.
Because men being creepy around women, especially hot women, is very normal.
The real wage gap is the fact that this gap isn't big enough.
Feminism is a joke. Feminism is what has caused decades of women's unhappiness and unsatisfaction.
Women are getting promoted just literally because of the fact that they're female. How
people don't get into families anymore because of feminism.
It's so clear that companies are actually paying men and women different. And of course, it's not in the way that most people think. They're paying women more.
I did and I would have come across as creepy to a fair amount of girls, but I also came across as flirty and sexual to a fair amount of girls, and that was a win for me.
Oh no, the feminist is bringing up false facts again. Jeffrey agrees with her. He's a white knight. Even though he's a man, he acts like he hates other men just because he wants to sleep with the feminist. Like, Jeffrey argues with other men. We need to do something about the wage gap, guys. Women earn 77% of what men do.
For someone who complains about men's issues not being taken seriously, Hamza doesn't seem to acknowledge or validate any of women's issues in any of his videos, and even uses misinformation to dismiss them. The only times he mentions women's issues is to emphasize how they are purely a means of propaganda and are used as an excuse to oppress men. We'll start with workplace gender discrimination.
The cancer that is feminism and the big push that they convinced and brainwashed women to get into the workplace to degrade themselves because women were happier when they were housewives and mothers. That's a proven fact. Well,
I assume what he is referring to is a paper from 2009 that found women were happier in the 1970s. The paper does not assert at all that women are happier as housewives, and in fact, gives a number of reasons that might explain this difference. But most importantly, they explain that your perception of happiness is subjective and objective conditions such as health, comfort, virtue, or wealth are notably absent from the study. So no, it's not a proven fact that women were happier as housewives. That is not what the study said.
That's a proven fact. Well,
oh no, the feminist is bringing up false facts again. It's so clear that companies are actually paying men and women different. And of course, it's not in the way that most people think. They're paying women more. Women are getting promoted just literally because of the fact that they're female. How is that not the sexism that we should be discussing?
Okay. I assume that he is referring to gender quotas, which means that employers need to hire a certain amount of women by law. I'm guessing now that Hamza just watched the Jordan Peterson and Kathy Newman debate and repeated his poor interpretation of what Peterson said. I say poor interpretation because gender quotas are practically illegal in the USA and the UK. So what the fuck is he talking about?
But the true wage gap, it's like such a basic f***ing like key stage 3, like f***ing, not even GCSE, like primary school level maths that some random f***ing feminist 10 years ago got, and people still bring it up, and every single time it almost makes my blood boil.
Okay, this is how I know he is just copying what he heard in the Peterson video. The primary school maths that he is referring to is univariate data analysis, something that is not taught in primary or high school in the UK. The reason why Hamza is insulting univariate data analysis so heavily despite not knowing what it is that Peterson emphatically stated it was a basic tool for social scientists.
Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
Univariate data analysis does have some advantages, but it is limited as it only allows us to understand the distribution of values for one variable. In the case of the gender pay gap, the pay gap is determined by a multitude of factors, but as Peterson also states, gender is one of those factors.
Pay gap, that's a gap between median hourly earnings between men and women.
But there's
that exists.
Yeah, but there's multiple reasons for that. One of them is gender, but it's not the only reason.
So although systemic sexism isn't the only cause of the gender pay gap, it still influences it, because there are people that think that women shouldn't be in the workplace at all. So is it not possible that a proportion of people with these beliefs could also be employers and pay and promote women less because of their beliefs? Because we know people with these beliefs exist.
And people don't get into families anymore because of feminism. Feminism doubled the supply of workers into the workforce. Have you ever heard of the concept supply and demand? When you double the supply of something and the demand of it doesn't really increase, well then the price of it decreases because we've got more of that thing.
There is a labor shortage in the UK, so this point is just dumb already. Funnily enough, there are loads of factors that have affected the demand for labor, especially since the fucking 1950s. Since the internet and cell phones weren't around back then, you don't think that those inventions might have created a few more jobs, Hamza?
When you double the supply of the workers, you can't pay them more. You have to pay them the same or even less, and this is why wages have been stagnated for decades.
There are millions of men working death professions, dangerous jobs, and this isn't spoke about anywhere near as much as it needs to be. A death profession is usually a low-end, low-wage job that doesn't really require like a higher level of education. In practical terms, these jobs pay usually an extra £1 to £2 per hour, but they increase your risk of death on the workplace by twice as much, maybe more.
12 seconds later.
What they don't see is men are more than 10 times more likely to die on the job. The real wage gap is the fact that this gap isn't big enough. If someone's risking their f***ing life, then should they not be paid more?
He's a man, so it must be sexist.
He is right somewhat in saying that men are more likely to work more dangerous jobs and they generally are paid a bit more for them. The biggest determinant of the gender wage gap is the occupations and industries men and women are most likely to work in. But it also begs the question of why are vital female-dominated professions such as nursing and teaching so underpaid, and why is it that when men and women do pick the same occupation, women tend to be paid 70 to 80% as much as men? These are statistics from the US government. If you want to refute them, give good evidence as to why they are misleading.
You work in a shop and you're open late nights and you sell alcohol, and drunk f***ing 20-something-year-old guys who are like literally, you know, like they just like to like be violent and shit and racist and everything, and they come into the shop, they hurl abuse at this f***ing guy who's just trying to make money for his family. Why is he open so late? Why does an Uber driver work at 2 a.m. instead of being in bed with his wife? Because they literally make a couple of pounds more per hour on those late nights.
And yeah, this is definitely true. Men do tend up to take up more dangerous jobs, ones that aren't very well paid. People who take these potentially dangerous jobs to provide for their families are completely undervalued by society.
You know what? The percentage of women in these jobs is so small that I'm not even going to acknowledge it anymore. We're not going to do this of like almost entirely, like 96. No. We can just say it's filled up entirely of men. If they can exaggerate their facts and say like there's such a thing as the wage gap.
But then he's also ignoring the fact there are also plenty of women who work late night in bars, clubs, fast food restaurants etc. that also face the same risks if not more. Oh, and those women who do take up these dangerous jobs are paid less for them too.
Feminism is a joke. Feminism is what has caused decades of women's unhappiness and unsatisfaction. It's what's caused decades of the destruction of families, that caused the largest happiness increase we could have ever gotten. People don't get into families anymore because of feminism.
Women entering the workplace may have some possible negative effects on the traditional family structure, especially if both parents spend little time with their children as a result of having to devote most of their time to their careers. Although this issue does arise with more women pursuing careers, taking Hamza's stance is ignoring so many obvious positives. 1. Women don't have to be dependent on men for money or housing and aren't forced into a relationship that they don't want to be in order to survive. 2. If a woman is stuck in an abusive relationship, she has the option to leave as she has the ability to provide for herself, compared to 100 years ago where if a woman wanted to leave an abusive relationship she essentially was left homeless with no support whatsoever. Additionally, women being able to leave abusive relationships is actually better for the children, and there is strong evidence to suggest that children's well-being increases a year after a divorce where one of the parents was abusive. 3. I certainly don't think women should be pressured into a career and should have the option to be housewives or stay-at-home mothers if they so choose to. But remarkably, I also believe that women can have passions and aspirations other than raising children and should have the choice to do so if they please. Despite barriers placed on women throughout history, they have still been able to contribute to science, the arts, psychology, medicine, philosophy, well, pretty much anything. So allowing more women to pursue careers will surely lead to development in pretty much every industry. But what do I know? I'm just a Jeffrey trying to sleep with feminists.
You aren't weird for being creepy around women, because men being creepy around women, especially hot women, is very normal.
No! God, please, no! No!
We didn't want to be normal anyway, so you're going to learn how to be abnormal like me.
Okay, this is sounding a bit better.
And how to be abnormal like me, speak to girls in a smooth, flirty way.
Still sounding a bit creepy.
barrier to the actions that you do being perceived as creepy is just linear to how much more self-improvement you've done and also just how much of like a Chad that you become. And you
No! God, please, no!
You have to go through the transition period where you actually become a little bit creepy. So for example, if you cross this height, you're creepy. But if you've got hunter eyes, then the height up here, higher value you are, the higher your SMV, your sexual market value, the higher the barrier for creepiness.
Damn, this dude must be really ugly.
Unattractive piece of shit right now, so your barrier to being creepy is way down here, like no girls want to speak to me. I did and I would have come across as creepy to a fair amount of girls, but I also came across as flirty and sexual to a fair amount of girls, and that was a win for me.
No. I honestly hope that he is misusing the word creepy here, but this can just be misinterpreted in so many ways. And don't tell me it's taken out of context. Go watch the video and tell me what context makes this better.
You forgot to add the part where Hamza's girl rated his creepiness 1 out of 10. Out of context. Debunked.
I don't think any woman that I interact with thinks of me creepy at all. And in fact, the girl that I'm dating, I sent her this text just saying, rate me out of 10 for creepiness.
So maybe it's not the best idea to be spreading the message that being creepy around women is normal to a bunch of young men. There is obviously a difference between being nervous or anxious around women and being creepy. Maybe in a video about how not to be creepy, tell the audience not to approach women when you are incoherently drunk. Don't stare at them for extended periods of time. Don't back them into corners. Don't make unsolicited explicit or sexual comments. Show social awareness. Give personal space. Don't be excessively persistent or insulting after being rejected and leave when a woman is clearly not interested instead. That would probably be more effective than telling men to be more attractive. Although attractive people might get away with these things more in certain scenarios, they can still definitely come across as creepy.
No! God! No! God, please, no! 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 No!